Greetings and welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of Poly Weekly News. I'm your host, David Danto, just back from Enterprise Connect in Orlando with a couple of the preeminent analysts that were with me there at the show. And we're going to have a chat about what we saw and what we heard and what our feelings are. So joining me are Beth Schultz and Craig Durr. Beth, why don't you introduce yourself, remind everybody on the show who you are and what you do.
Well, thank you, David. Happy to do that. I am the Vice President of Research and Principal Analyst with Metrigy, and I lead Metrigy's coverage of employee experience.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you being on here. And Craig, you've been on the show as well. Just remind everybody again about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Craig Durr, Wainhouse Research. I'm a senior analyst and a researcher at that company. I focus on group collaboration experiences, so the devices, the services, the technology in the conference room and around the office space.
So Enterprise Connect has been around in one or more various iterations for more than 25 years, probably more than 30 years at this point. It was originally VoiceCon and it's gone through some other changes. It's 3.5, 4 days worth of getting together and networking in the Gaylord Palms in Florida, where we just were. And believe it or not, I got a little bit of a tan just from sitting in the atrium out there with the sun coming in through the windows. And it was an interesting show this year in that we were back last year in person after the big pandemic, but this was really the year that everybody was back in full force and kind of talking about what was going on. A lot of interesting things going on. I suppose that we should really kind of get into some of the major topics. One of them is it was a nice level setting and understanding and realization that no matter what anybody's been talking about in terms of, old dead buzzwords or anything else, hybrid working is still not settled science. And there were a lot of people talking about the employee experience around what that was like and the gap. Ambia had some research about the gap between what senior management feels is going on in the workplace and what workers feel is going on in the workplace. Craig, you had some presentations around, version 2.0 of hybrid working. I'll ask you both. Craig, we'll start with you. Why don't you kind of fill everybody in on what you heard from people and what your feelings are around what the state of work is, certainly in the US, if not around the world.
It's a great question. I think there's an element where you have this technology curve where yourself with Poly, other vendors in the space are coming out with some great technology to help enable hybrid work, but the adoption curve isn't quite catching up to that same rollout of where that technology and enablement is. So I think what we're dealing with in the United States is there's still a learning curve and a hesitancy sometimes to put this into space. Now, the US is a little bit different than where, let's say, Western Europe is or certain areas of Asia Pacific. They have a lot more activity of bringing people in and out of the office from other reasons. There's some research that I shared that showed that actually the US has a bit of a glut in its real estate market, which is kind of hiding this whole hybrid work and makes it kind of the red herring of why it's not working in offices. But I think the interesting thing that's taking place is we're at the point in this intersection where it's our job to help build trust with these technologies that are coming to market right now, and that they would be appropriate for this type of space. Everything from intelligent cameras to intelligent audio, that they do work and that they do help with some of these key ideas we talked about, meeting equity, everyone participating, feeling of inclusion, things like that as well.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into some of the technologies that were announced and some really interesting and shocking announcements that came out at the show around interoperability and things like that. But Beth, I want to kind of get your opinion on this space as well, because you're, again, covering it more from the employee experience perspective. Do you feel that this is as large a gap as some of the other analysts have pointed out? And are we doing anything to kind of try and get everybody on the same page?
I do think there is a gap. There's the desire to bring people into the office, reticence to get into the office. What are you going to do there once you're there? Metrigy's research shows that the perception of culture and community within companies is actually it's worsening. So, like last year, our research showed that remote work was a big challenge for about 20, I think it's about 29% of companies. This year, it's the top challenge that people cite of remote work, hybrid work, and the percentage has gone up to about 40%, saying that's an issue. So definitely still a real challenge around hybrid work and making sure that people are, I think you said it earlier, Craig, you don't come into the office earlier when we were chatting amongst ourselves, you don't come into the office if there's no reason to be in the office, right? That just causes a lot of disgruntlement.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we've been seeing in some of the research that we've been doing at Poly and HP, in that there's a small group of people, something in the neighborhood of like 22%, that feel they're thriving in the hybrid work environment. And the ones that do feel they are thriving answer the survey that they've got all the technology and support that they need. So you can kind of extrapolate from that, as if we were able to give everybody the technology and support that they need, they might thrive more. But again, that point was made by some of the end users that you just brought up, Beth, which is, if you're bringing people back to the office just to have them do in the office what they could do from home, then there's no point. That there needs to be a real purpose and a real difference for that office to be a magnet. We heard it over and over at a number of the presentations. So I'm not sure what we're going to do to close that gap. I don't know if it's just elite versus employees, or if it's age appropriate, or what the situation is. But I think that, we're not even close to resolving what some of those pieces are.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm sorry, go ahead, Craig.
No, please, Beth, I apologize.
Well, I was just going to recall just sort of a personal situation that I had. My son worked for in an internship over last summer, all from home, major company, but all from home, headquartered here in Chicago. He never once went into the office, never once met a single other person in, face to face. And while he was offered a full-time position for after he graduates, he opted out. He was like, I can't live like that. Like, I want to be in the office. So I think there is a generational thing, and people always talk about the younger generation being so, in tune with video, but I think they need to be in person. And there's a lot to be said for learning from those that you're kind of sitting across from, and watching leadership styles, everything. And you don't get that as much from digital connection.
Yeah, I've seen it as a bimodal curve in the reports that I've seen, where at the very beginning of the career and at the very end of the career, there's a lot of importance placed on the experience in the office. And the people that are in the middle of the career are much happier not having the commute and being able to take care of pets and kids and whatever else is going on. So like I said, I don't think we've really figured out how to hit the stride on this thing. Clearly, businesses did not close when we all work from home. So the product, wherever you believe this, productivity and everything else, things didn't collapse. So what do we do now to make people understand that the misconceptions around hybrid, it's not just remote working, it's not just come to the office in the time, it's an and, not an or. And we still have a challenge as an industry to get through that.
In the talk that I presented there, one of the buzz phrases I use is, we're going into a hybrid 2.0 scenario. And I think if there was one key thing we saw when we were doing this research on this particular topic was, first of all, there's no single playbook for everyone. So like Beth's example, where there's different generational inputs, it varies what's taking place. When we saw a lot of failure those first times is when these companies, especially these C-level executives, approached hybrid work as the initiative in itself. Yeah, I have 5 key initiatives for the year. One of them is, I'm setting up hybrid work, and here's my tower, and I'm doing it. And they approach it like a one and done. Okay, we're going to do 3 days a week, or you set your schedule, and here's some technology, do it. But the ones that were successful used hybrid work as a tool for those other initiatives, as opposed to being one of the key things that led up. It was hybrid work supporting a DE&I initiative. It was hybrid work supporting an ESG initiative. Hybrid work supporting a real estate consolidation, or whatever it was that was part of that. And that allowed them to use it as a tool in hybrid, because it's very unique for offices, for individuals. Once you start thinking about that, it allows you to start thinking about it in an iterative process, a living process that you can continue to adjust along the way. So I think that was one of the key takeaways we had that we were trying to articulate with people. Hybrid work it's a great tool, but it's not the end game. Use this and help you in how you grow your business.
I like that point. I think that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, terrific point. And I'm glad that I caught at least most of your session, Craig, before I had to run. I was somebody commented that they were in your session and they didn't see me there. And it's just because I come in late, sit in the back, leave early, and that's how I can be double booked for the entire enterprise.
You put a picture up. I saw that. I saw that. I appreciate everyone who's there. It was a good session.
All right,
Beth
so
had a
let's
great one too, by the way.
absolutely. Let's pivot a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about the technology and how great the poly technology. I don't know, but it was great. Interoperability was one of the major themes to come out this year again. And I've made the joke that 100 years from now we're going to have robots doing surgery for us. There'll be autonomous cars driving everywhere, and our industry will still be talking about interoperability. It's just the nature I've determined after my career. It's just the nature of the industry. Poly is very pleased to have come out with the version 4 firmware for our Android video bars, which is a tremendous leap ahead. It means that the Microsoft Teams native certification and compatibility for our larger video bars. We have the only integrator codec now that's Teams compatible as an appliance. It means that the Google Meet certification is now GA and it's out and available. And there are a bunch of other little improvements as well. So again, the idea that people who paid for this technology and purchased it now with a software upgrade, brings us up to Android 10 as well. That is now something that extends the platform's ability to be able to pivot with the end user. We had a couple of circumstances where a couple of fierce competitors of the past were in each other's keynotes showing things off. So I think we're continuing to talk about this interoperability, and the more of it that we have, the better. I'll ask either one of you if you want to comment about that.
I mean, happy to jump in quickly. I think the real key when we think about interoperability is we have to think about sort of seamlessness for the user, right? So, that should be our kind of guiding principle. And if that means you can walk into a Cisco room and press a button and get your Teams interface without problem, that's fantastic. If it means you can go in and call up a Google meeting on a Poly Room device, that's great, right? But we need more interoperability. We need it to be seamless. We need to focus less on maybe the word interoperability and what it really means for the end user, which is ease of use.
Right. Actually, it goes back to our earlier topic about some of the office challenges, which is friction. Friction in how I would want to try and work is going to keep me from, in that case, going into the office. And in this case, getting on a Zoom call or a Teams call or a WebEx call because I'm having a hard time to connect. And there's value. Some of these UC platforms, such as Microsoft, they value the native experience. I can train you on your laptop. Therefore, you walk into the room and you know what it is. Partnering with Cisco, I now have the best device according to what WebEx has done in terms of their devices in the room. So you have a great device experience with their native experience. Maybe it goes back to that same idea, not one size fits all. Maybe it's what's appropriate so that if you're purely a Microsoft shop, Zoom shop, what have you. Beth, I'm not sure if I think you guys have done this research as well. When we did it earlier in the pandemic, we found out that people had multiple licenses. They had a Zoom license and a Team license. And the really interesting thing early on was that it was 48% were IT blessed. These weren't shadow people doing it. This was IT. Gave Beth a Zoom license, gave Beth a Teams license, and then you had to figure out when and where you were using based upon business customers or whatever. So there's still some complexity, and the interop story should continue to try and solve for that employee experience.
Yeah, and it's, I'm not saying anything that people who are watching don't already know, but we understand it's not a technical problem. We understand that in multiple companies' labs, you can just press a button and join whichever system you want. It's a political problem. It's a business problem. Companies would like to keep you within their walled gardens, and they're going to make it harder for you to jump out and go to somebody else's. So, clearly, I'm pleased that there's a good agreement between my friends at Cisco and Microsoft, but we'd like to see some of those agreements extend past those and go into other platforms as well. So it's definitely something I'd like to continue to see our industry improve upon. And I think customers would like that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly benefits everybody. I think, the more,
Absolutely.
The easier you make it to use a product, the more it'll be used, right?
So one of the things that we also talked about at the show extensively. In fact, I think it was the buzzword bingo contest for this year is the idea of AI. We're in the age of generative voice learning, ChatGPT and Bard and all the rest of them. And we saw a number of demos on a number of platforms about how those things are working. And I saw a great article, and I'll try and share the graphic here when we post this around, if you're familiar with the term, the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is the idea that you have to have a certain level of intelligence in exactly what it is you don't know in order to understand how much you don't know. These generative language programs are the epitome of that, in that it looks like it really knows what it's talking about. It sounds like it really knows what it's talking about, but unless you're an expert in what it's talking about, you really don't know if
You don't
you know
know,
what
yeah.
it's talking about. So as much as I love some of the features, and again, they were shown by a number of manufacturers, I'm a little bit concerned about putting a lot of business reliance in AI summaries and language features, because I'm a little concerned that they won't be 100% accurate, and you'll get a miss right where you can't handle it.
Yeah. There's two things. It's a very complex problem. There's two things I'm keeping an eye on. So one of the key things I saw about AI here from our UC brethren in this thing is they're taking different approaches to it. And I think it's going to be, customers will find what works for them. So for example, Microsoft has got the OpenAI partnership, and they have it very much integrated with what they're doing. Other people are building it internally. They've actually done acquisitions in the past and are doing some things like Ring Central and what have you. Zoom is doing something really interesting. They call it federated, which starts with a combination of OpenAI, some of the work they're doing, and supposedly their roadmap allows people to bring in their own version of that. So, you've got now, to your model, David, you've got 3 or 4 experts. You now need to figure out which one's telling you the right thing or not. But I think what's going to make it really interesting is when the ecosystem starts enabling more near-term data to be harvested from these within the platform. So ChatGPT was benchmarked up to September 2021. And it can talk to you about information it saw there. And as these UC platforms start pulling in more information, or even customer specific information, I know how many times I've talked to David, how many times he's called in with an issue, how many times we resolved it, or other things going on as well too. That's where it becomes kind of interesting. And then hopefully it mitigates the idea that I'm getting a wrong answer, but I don't know if I'm getting the wrong answer. Again, yeah, you still have to trust this service or not, but bringing in more of the real time information or near term information, I think is going to make it powerful.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's going to make all the difference when you start to bring in that customer data, and then it's more trusted. But you always have to have the human in the loop. Or at least near term, you have to have that human in the loop. And hopefully, if you're building summaries and whatnot on customer data, whoever that human is can actually understand whether it's right or wrong, or make it better. But
yeah, I think I don't think we want to give up our jobs to AI just yet. I think we might want to morph our jobs from authors to editors, but we really have to take that editing role very seriously. And I could be wrong. I could just be, a curmudgeon and a naysayer. And I've certainly used some of the, Bard and ChatGPT and some of the other platforms as well. And I can't wait to use Copilot because it looks awesome. But
that looks awesome, yeah.
A healthy dose of skepticism, I think, is appropriate. As you look at the data, and instead of saying, "Oh, good, it's done. Now I can go off and play with the kids," I think we really have to be the editors to kind of look at the data. But that again, from many of the platform providers and manufacturers, is one of the key points that came out at the show. Another one. I'm going to keep pivoting here.
Well, let me give you one quick thing about this. This is really, I think it's important, and we're going to only find out what's going forward. Our first thing was everything moving to cloud. The second phase was mobility becoming a very important part. This is going to be a new horizon. So we are right to be skeptical, but I don't know if we currently can fathom how far it could go in terms of what it might do for UC integrations and stores.
Oh, absolutely. The interesting thing is at multiple conferences, and I include Enterprise Connect and VoiceCon before that as well. Multiple conferences, we were talking about cloud to the point where everybody was sick of the term, but nobody could really care less. And then when the pandemic came around, if you weren't in the cloud, you were dead. So it wasn't, nobody actually finally went to it until there was that initiating point where everybody just had to go because there's no other way of dealing with it. You saw financial services moving their services to the cloud, and there's very little on-prem PBX that takes place anymore, very little on-prem communication. So and I'm sure it's going to be the same way with AI, that, we'll be dabbling in it, we'll be playing with it. And, You know, at some point it's going to be the only thing that's out there, which is cool and interesting. The another thing, which is another application of AI, but not language processing, not language models, is something that a number of vendor shows. Of course, Poly was first, you know, and we had Director AI out there in terms of the ability of making shots and having machine learning understand what it is to have people in their tile. You know, the after all these years in video conferencing, instead of the office experience being the one people wanted, the home experience where we're all in our own square like we are now, is what we needed to do. But you know, then Cisco came out with an announcement at the show, which they're calling cinematic, right? You'll
Cinematic
have to
meetings, yeah.
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you know, it's essentially the same thing, as well as you know, Zoom was showing their intelligent director, again, essentially the same thing, where multiple I called this in a white paper that I wrote. I'll have to try and find a link to it. In the early 2000s, camera arrays, and what you're going to have is multiple cameras in a room, all talking to each other, all using the smarts we've built into the system, into the machine learning, to figure out who's got the best shot or shots and send them out at the same time. And you're going to start to see more and more manufacturers moving in that direction. I was always actually hoping that what we would do is we would use fiber optic cameras like around the bezels of pictures and displays in a room, and just kind of tie them all back together in a processor and then let it reproduce the images where they needed to be. But you know, we're sort of at phase one of this camera array point, where there are going to be multiple cameras in a room and the intelligence is going to parse it out. I do think it's the future of meetings, but Craig, as you pointed out, I think it's something that is going to take a while for people to adopt.
It is. You know, there's an interesting challenge taking place. So to kind of go through some of the nuances, people were taking cameras, capturing multiple images, and that's called multi-stream. Multi-stream was then being pushed into Zoom's smart gallery with one or two images from a single camera. This next evolution, if you will, which has kind of been there, but it's you're right, it's taking separate cameras, so it's multi-camera and creating the same effect. But that means somewhere there's got to be a parent to a child relationship or something that's managing. I can tell you when to cut and when to do this. So it's going from these broadcast-like controls between multiple cameras and putting it into this automatic process. So here's I think what's going to be the really interesting tipping point about this. What you're describing is ideal for large rooms, flex rooms, town halls, these very large, complex rooms that need multiple cameras, especially ones that have glass to them as well. A lot of times, these rooms host your most important meetings. It's my executive talking to the rest of the company at C-level. It's the board of directors meeting. And I have heard, and again, I can research, go back to some research, IT administrators are hesitant to turn over those most important meetings to technology that they're not quite yet have fully vetted all the way out. It's the white glove service. I don't want to make sure that, you know, Andy Rhodes looks bad in a meeting. I want to make sure I capture him every single time when he's walking around that
Andy
room.
Rhodes never looks bad, but go ahead.
No, he doesn't. He's so tall. You just have to make sure the camera rises up high enough to see where he is. But so we have this interesting junction of the technology curve being there and the adoption of the trust to utilize it for those important meetings in those important rooms. And I think the key trade-off is going to take place as that continues to push down to medium-sized rooms or large rooms that are more of the daily meetings. I start trusting that there as well too. And that's going to be really interesting when it takes place.
Mm-hmm. And Beth, how do you perceive from an employee perspective that concept of trusting the technology? Is it as bad as it used to be, or difficult as it used to be, where you needed formal adoption to get people to understand it? Or are we starting to get a little bit better with the old iPhone model, which is put it out there, let people start trying it and playing it, and they'll start to use it? I mean, how far along that curve are we? Can we throw more technology out at people?
I mean, I think people will always gravitate towards what they're most comfortable with, but at the same time, there is definitely more of an openness to new technology these days. But when it comes to getting the job done, for example, a conference room, you're going to want to walk into the conference room and do what is familiar to you. I think, and same thing with applications as well. We see that all the time with the video meetings. You know, we might have a Zoom call, but Teams is our native platform. We'll do it, but we prefer to be on Teams, or vice versa, or whatever. So
So are adoption programs just as important as they always were? Should formal usage and adoption be rolled out with some of these technologies? Because I found that an interesting stat to come out of the pandemic was that if you've been involved in any kind of technology rollout over the last 20 or 30 years, there's always a proof of concept and then a phase 1 and a phase 2 and a phase 3, and you kind of get there after 3 or 6 months or whatever the project requires. And when people were told, go home, and by the way, we're all going to be on Microsoft Teams tomorrow, and we just threw everybody into the pool fee first, there weren't any more problems than there would have been over a 6-month period. So I'm just curious if that usage and adoption piece, if you, to your knowledge, is changing at all, or if it's still something that's really important to make available to company employees.
I personally think it's important. I think you're not going to get the true value out of your piece of software or whatever if you're not training users on how to use it. They'll use the little pieces that they are familiar with, but they won't go beyond that.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't have any. We don't have any adoption data though, so I don't know if you do, Craig.
Yeah, I don't either, but you're right. And I'm thinking through your son's example, which is fantastic. I mean, it used to be, do you remember we would go in conference room process, there'd be a card there that explained how to use the system or some instructions on the wall. Well, now we have so many people remote trying to use technology, and they don't have that opportunity to go into a central environment and learn, watch other people, how they're doing it, using it, how, more importantly, how, in their workflow and things like that. So there's the ability to know how to use the technology, and then there's the ability how to have technology work for me, my workflow and what I'm doing as well too.
Yeah.
So I think it is important, David, but I don't know if we figured out how to really train that for that right now.
Well, that's actually one of the most important things of a remote work setup. We went through an era where we were telling people just go out to the store and buy whatever you can, or get it online and put it in. And the ones that were thriving were the ones that built setups that they were comfortable using. But if we really want everybody to thrive, we need to be able to put in standard equipment that IT support can support and monitor and check. So it should be 1 or 2 or 3 types of cameras, or 1 or 2 or 3 types of headsets, or something that again, that's remotely monitorable and manageable by the IT team, so we can troubleshoot it and give that education to people so that they're not using 5 million different types of systems out there. So I definitely think that's something that we're sort of not paying as much attention to because we're in the middle of a big return to office piece right now. But the standardization around technologies is something that's going to help this process quite a bit.
Yeah.
So Beth, one of the other topics that I wanted to cover, because I know I think you spoke about it at Enterprise Connect, was how much data exists right now about what employees are experiencing, what their use cases are, what kind of tools that they're dealing with, and how organizations can really gain from learning the actual utilization data and the experiential data that comes from this. Can you give us an idea of how you went into that and what organizations can gain from that kind of a model?
Sure. Yes, I did speak about that. Had a session on kind of the coming together of collaboration and employee experience. So that merging of the IT world with the HR world, where HR used to be almost exclusively responsible for employee engagement, but all of a sudden now everything became so much more around the digital workplace when we went home. And what can we pull out of the collaboration ecosystem to help us understand how employees are engaging and how they are experiencing, the experience that they have with the companies throughout the day. So from a collaboration ecosystem, whether it's your team collaboration applications or your video meeting applications, your video meeting room systems, your headsets, whatever it might be. I mean, there's just a ton of data that's collected. And what we've seen over the last couple of years is an increasing request for and vendors responding to pulling the data out of those systems and surfacing that data, not only to the employees themselves, but also in aggregate for IT, for HR, for other decision makers, so they can really understand what's going on. And then you're not only providing employees awareness, but ideally some sort of actionable advice, guidance. You're not going to mandate, you don't necessarily want to mandate too much, but you want to make suggestions. So it's so, it can be anything from simple stuff like you're consistently joining meetings 5 minutes late and keeping yourself on mute. get people to start thinking about their behavior. Why am I doing that? Do I really need to be in so many meetings? Complement that with AI meeting summaries. Well, maybe that's all I need to do. I don't need to actually attend a meeting. So, or companies can take the information and start putting in place some policies. Like no meeting Fridays is one example. So,
Yeah, I've
but
pulled
yeah,
some.
great stuff.
We've talked about on the show in the past that because Poly creates the endpoints that are in the room that are universally compatible on all platforms, that we're able to provide data through PolyLens and the PolyLens APIs that tell people what's going on in the room. Yeah, a platform can tell you how many minutes of calling you've been, the typical old CDR, how long you've been on this versus that, but they can't really tell you occupancy in a room. You'd have to put in an occupancy sensor for that, but we're providing that data as well as a whole bunch of other data as well. So that's really valuable to understand. Are your rooms constantly over capacity, constantly under capacity, not utilized at all? Utilized for video calls, but not meetings, utilized for meetings, but not video calls.
Mm-hmm.
Equipping HR and facilities and the IT group with that data really helps make for better decisions going forward, especially as we're all trying to figure out what we're doing with office footprints.
Yeah, absolutely. How much collaborative space do you really need? And what size rooms does that collaborative space need to be available in? So.
Yeah. Well, of course, it needs to be in every room, but that's just my personal opinion. So Craig, before we leave this, I wanted to ask you if you had any reactions. I know that you and Beth and a number of the other analysts got together at our booth to try our new Voyager 360s out. And,
yeah, I got mine here too.
I used mine on the this is the 360 UC Plus. I got mine working on the way home. I was listening to a movie on the airplane, and hopefully the adaptive noise cancellation was keeping.
That was fun. I tell you, I was really excited because you guys first announced this at CES, and so I haven't had a chance to play with it and actually see one until now. And I really appreciate you guys sharing them with us along the way. I like it because there's a couple of things that were in market around these headsets that I think you guys brought into a single form factor. The interactive smart flat panel, the touch capacitive panel up front. The fun thing you just talked about, which is the Bluetooth pairing for like in-flight entertainment. I did listen to the movie as well going there. But some of the other things too, which are probably more practical, is having that USB dongle. As retro as this may seem, when we're talking about Bluetooth as a standard is not rock solid. It's only when you control both the receiver and the transmitter that you can really have a higher quality call experience. And I think that's what really you see people understanding about when they go to true earbuds versus, true wireless earbuds versus picking up some consumer brands as well too, right? So it was nice. I'm continuing to play with them. We'll see how the microphones pick up and the fit, but they're a lot of fun.
Yeah, and as you point out, they do come with either USB-C or a USB-A dongle, depending upon which kit you get and what accessories you want. And we do need to use that dongle because that gives you that high bandwidth, high quality Bluetooth connection that you can't get out of a typical notebook PC when you're just pairing over Bluetooth. But if you think in your mind, if we could pair the best headset maker on the planet with the best notebook maker on the planet.
If you just had insights, like an inside track to like that.
Wonder if there's anything we can do. Well, all right. Oh, no, that's not for this year. But that's some nice, interesting speculation that we can talk about at a future time. So Beth, will you be going back to Enterprise Connect next year?
I would presume so. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I'll go with the presume so as well. What about you, Craig?
Oh yeah, we'll be there. But there's other great stuff between now and then. There's InfoComm in June, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's some other things. We get back into the European-based session before we see each other again at Enterprise Connect. So a lot of opportunity for you guys to announce some great stuff.
Yeah, and absolutely. There's also 2 new shows happening this year. The UC Expo show, which is usually in the UK, is going to be in Austin. In the US for this year. So that's going to be a nice one. UCX US
September.
That we're all kind of involved with. And the week before that, the CEDIA Expo team, our friends at Emerald Expos, are going to be combining Commercial Integrator Expo with CEDIA Expo. And I'm certainly going to be there as well. We're going to be doing some
interesting
education as well. So that first week of September is going to be first and second week of September is going to be a very busy time for things. So yeah, a lot of additional opportunities to see each other and to see clients and customers and get that feedback in. But I'm pleased that we finished another Enterprise Connect, and we all sort of, not worse for wear, we're all back home and things are doing well. Had some great announcements, and I'm looking forward to the rest of them that we're going to have this year. So Beth, let me go to you. If there are any anyone wants to reach out to you, find out more about what you do, ask you any questions, how should they do that?
They can go to metrigy.com and find me there. Just hit contact us, and that's where they can find me, or just email me directly at beth.schultz@metrigy.com.
Thank you very much. Craig, same question for you. How does somebody reach out to you?
Same thing, waynehouse.com. But if they want to reach out to myself as well, they can find me on LinkedIn at Craig
Yes,
Durr.
LinkedIn too, yes.
Exactly, as well as Twitter is at Craig Durr as well.
Yes,
and I hope everyone if is listening has a chance to go out there. We've had a chance to do some fun videos, and there was a fun one where I was trying to challenge all our smart friends out there at Enterprise Connect if they could tell me if something was real or fake. Maybe they will, maybe they're not. Go look on LinkedIn and Twitter. You'll see the video.
You know, Craig, I'm a little disappointed because we are actually working on telekinesis as a service, and you spilled the beans on that one.
See, you did see it. So there you go. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to Unicorn as a service. Whenever that one comes out, we're going to.
Exactly. So that's it for this week's wacky, fun, wonderful Enterprise Connect wrap-up edition of Poly Weekly News. Next week, we will all get together back over here, and we'll do a little bit more of a serious walkthrough with my colleague Jan about what our version 4 firmware is like and what some of the new features are, and we'll give everybody some of the details and breakdowns and a little show and tell. But until then, for everybody at Poly and HP, my name is David Danto, your host. Thank you very much for joining us. I really do appreciate you taking the time to do this every week. We'll see you next week.